everyone. We don't have our board today, so we're going to have to rely heavily on our sheets, which is okay. We actually would not have needed it too much today anyway. There's 9 questions on the sheet tonight. Most of them are trick questions and will be more so in more traditional classroom study format, just for knowledge base. Me personally, just for my own personal study, whenever I work on anything related to Old Testament, could be me just sitting in someone's class or sermon or what have you, but I try to force myself to look at it more technical because we're so focused on New Testament. Nothing wrong with that, but there's still a lot of information to be had when you look at things from the Old Testament standpoint, especially when you look at being in a relationship with God, which this whole lesson based on a sermon is about. This is the deeper meetings, right? When you have a friend or you're dating or married to someone, you're always finding out little nuances or things, or when loved ones pass away and people give stories and you say, oh, I didn't know they like this thing or that thing. There's aspects of God's interaction with mankind from the Old Testament that will bear truth, and understanding in a deeper level for us as Christians. So it's just to look at it in a deeper meaning from that standpoint. I added one scripture to the 2 that were focused on from Sunday. It's in reference to Enoch, so it's not out of the scope of the flow. So if we can have, just for the sake of time, it doesn't matter if you read NIV or NASB or New King James on your sheet, but if we can have 3 readers read just one version. So we'll just go from Genesis to Hebrews to Jude. So Genesis 5:23 through 24. Then the next person read Hebrews 11:5. And then we'll conclude with Jude 1. There's only one chapter of Jude, verses 14 through 15. And then we'll begin.
Although Enoch lived a total of 365 years, Enoch walked faithfully with God, and then he was no more, because God took him away. Genesis 5:23 to 24 in KJV.
Thank you.
Hebrews 11:5. By faith Enoch was transferred to see not death, and he was not found because God transferred him. Let me change this version. This is ASB. American Standard Version. What's this? Fine. National Version. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
This is the International Version. By faith Enoch was taken from this life so that he did not experience death. He could not be found because God had taken him away. For before he was taken, he was commended as one who pleased God.
Thank you. And then lastly, Mike for Jude. Man, Jude can't get any love. It's a great book.
Jude 14 to 15. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied about them. See, the Lord is coming with thousands and thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone and to convict all of them of all the ungodly acts they have committed in their ungodliness, and of all the defiant words ungodly sinners have spoken against him. That's in New King James.
Thank you. Okay, Jude, just keep your mind there because that one, I hope we don't run out of time, but we're going to touch on that. This is more for biblical Bible study knowledge base, just so keep your mind there. Also, a lot of what we're going to be talking about tonight in terms of Jude in the first piece, which is hopefully why I hope we can get through most of these questions quickly, is for knowledge base, right? So think of secular school. There's things, especially when you're doing anything that requires writing an essay, there's aspects of the class that you'll need to retain in terms of knowledge that will help you write your essay. There's a part of Christianity that I think is missed worldwide, not as the church fault, but I think us as individual Christians, where we don't spend a lot of personal time getting that knowledge, that biblical knowledge, to be able to convey verbal essays of biblical concepts, right? Does that make sense? So in order to explain to somebody what salvation is, I have to have the knowledge of all the steps of salvation, why someone needs salvation, how they obtain salvation and how they keep salvation, and what does salvation mean? Meaning when you receive salvation, what is the end goal of that or result of that thing, right? But that knowledge comes first. But explaining it to someone doesn't mean I have to give them in the couple of minutes I have their attention, all of those details, but I have to convey to them the point of those things. Then usually people will say, well, where did you read that? Or where is that? Or who told you that? And that's when you get into the details. This is one of those things from a faith standpoint, right? We talk about faith a lot. This is one of the examples of attaching this concept of walking in the light as he is in the light, right? Walking by faith, not by sight. Modern Christianity understanding and concept, but applying it to things that God had established even in the Old Testament. In this instance, Enoch is the biblical character for that, right? So do you need to know who Enoch is to explain faith under the new covenant? No, not necessarily, right? But if we were grading essays, right, and somebody just told faith only from Matthew to Revelation, but somebody took a paragraph or more in the essay to mention Old Testament examples, the teacher would grade that more favorably, more likely if it was well written. That's the point, right? In Bible studies, which people miss, when you are able to study the Bible more clearly, it helps you in your convincing of yourself and your delivery of those spiritual truths throughout your life to others. That's the whole purpose of trying to study the Bible, right? Just like scholastically, you're trying to go from grade to grade. You have to obtain that information. So you have to do some homework or study, unless you have photographic memory, to be able to retain that in its highest, purest form. Some kids can pass just by going to class and not doing any homework. Right? We're talking about deeper dive, right? So when one thing we don't mention too much about in terms of Christianity, Paul is a good example of this, is even though we're all equal in Christ, right? There are levels of our individual Christianity, which means some people dive deeper into their relationship with God than others. Some people dive deeper into their biblical knowledge of the word than others, right? This is a study more so of that deeper dive of trying to figure out what is being said here, how we can apply it to our lives, and how we can explain it, because Enoch is a person in which the world has a lot of preconceived notions. When I say the world, in this context, I'm talking about denominations, right? I'm not talking about the world in the world who don't believe in Jesus in some form, because people who don't know anything, Enoch is not a popular character like a David or a Noah or Moses. So I'm talking about people who claim to be religious and who believe in some sort of Jesus or God, maybe not even Jesus, but some biblical concept, or whether it's Old Testament or New. Okay, with that being said, reference verses, there's a couple of examples here. Just to flow, 11:5 we read, Enoch had a faith walk with God. In the sermon, it was mentioned Genesis 17:1. Abraham had a faith walk with God, obviously a more popular, recognizable name. Isaac, Genesis 22:7, had a faith walk with God, right? We'll bring those up throughout the study if we need to as references, just for argument's sake, or you can in your own mentioning or comments. Those are good verses to look at. Hebrews 11:32 through 40 will allude to for a good portion. There's a lot of verses there. We're going to read hopefully the latter 2 or 3 verses, but there's several Bible characters in the passage that had a faith walk with God, so it's very important. So that's one that we'll take a look at for sure. And then one of the main verses, I'll read it now, but it will be kind of the basis of what we're talking about, will be Hebrews 11:6, which we quote quite often. Without faith, it is impossible to please him. To God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. That may have been a popular verse or important verse to you before. It should be clarified more tonight because it's directly after the Hebrews 11:5 verse mentioning Enoch, and that a Hebrews 11:5 verse is one of the best verses we have to who Enoch was in terms of our context. Because as you can see in Genesis, if you skip above or below in Genesis 5, above 23 or below 24, you'll notice Enoch is not really mentioned in that passage, in that chapter, that much. So you'll need some more context. Okay, let's look at a couple of things. And again, some of these are trick questions, so don't be upset if you don't have the right answer. The first question is, who was Enoch's father, Cain or Jared? Jared, right? But this is a trick question because did Cain have a son named Enoch? Yes, right? And even he named the city Enoch, right? So are we talking about the same Enoch? No, right? Depending on your translations, there's two other instances in Genesis where it's translated in Hebrew as the name Enoch. Four people mentioned. We're talking about just this. So this is a extremely trick question, right? Cain and Jared had sons Enoch. Hebrews 11:5 is talking about Jared's son Enoch, right? So that's the first one is don't fall for that trick because there are other Enochs mentioned. Why is that a big deal? Again, in our part of the world, in the type of beliefs we interact with, maybe not so. But there are people who worship negative aspects of the Bible and they pull them from the Bible, right? There are people that still follow this concept of the way of Cain. So that Enoch means something to them. Now you would be like, what are you talking about? I never heard of that, right? There's a couple of TV shows about world beliefs, and some of them have touched on that in recent years, right? Devil worshiping and some of those things that you'll see, wow, those are literally biblical characters that they're referencing. But of all the good in the Bible, they're only focusing on the negative aspects of it, and that became their religion. So it's just something to point out to you to be like, just know that some people, when you see Enoch, you're thinking a positive, and some people like, oh, I'm thinking about Cain's son. So just think of it that way. Anyway, next question. What age was Enoch when he started his faithful walk with God, according to Genesis 5? 65. Okay, that's good. And then it says, how many years did he walk with God faithfully? 300, right? And he died 365, right? So interesting fact there. Now, was Adam still alive? Sorry, go ahead.
You say, how old was Enoch when he started his faithful walk with God?
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking in verse 21?
Let's see, 21. He lived 65 years and begot Methuselah.
Yeah, is that I just wondered where you got that.
Oh no, so I see what you're saying. So what I did was, if you 23, he lived 365. 22, he walked 300 years, and then minus that for 65 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry, you're right. That should have been clarified. So 65 years he begot Methuselah. It says a total of 365 years he lived, and 300 years he walked with God. So 65 years, right? And it's also important to know when you go through chapter 5, the ages of when these men are having children is reducing, right? Because the first one, it says Adam lived how old before he begat Seth? Now, obviously he had kids before this, but it'll make sense when you talk about how old Seth was. But how old does it say before Adam beget Seth or had Seth? This is verse 3 of Genesis 5. 130, right? And then look at the next one for Seth. How old was Seth when he had Enoch? 105, and then Enoch was how long before Kenan? 90. See, we're kind of reducing some ages here, right? We might mention that, but that's a whole different study about if you go to Genesis 6 and it talks about the age of man being 120, that's a whole nother path. But that's why this matters in terms of math, right? Because to Nadine's point, right, it's not saying we have to do some math, right? So we're doing some subtractions, which is why we're going to get to in a second this trick question. This is why this math is important. Because question 3 is, was Adam still alive when Enoch walked faithfully with God? Now, we may not think of it this way, but if we go up, it says, how old did Adam live? Okay, so 930 years. So you may not have thought of Adam, but if you're talking about almost 1,000 years, we need to do some math, right? So you may need a calculator because we need to figure out how old. Now, this is why Seth's birth was important. Adam was how old when he had Seth? 130. Now you're going to have to do math to start adding every time each verse is mentioning when the son, then the grandson, then the great-grandson, then the great-great-grandson, how old they were when they had their kid, right? You need to add that math up to get to a number to see if that number is earlier than 930, right? And that would mean Adam is still alive, or it's later than 930, and that means Adam would have passed away. Or you can cheat and Google a genealogy graph that shows Adam genealogy to Noah, and it'll show you based on years, right? So was Adam and Enoch contemporaries? Meaning, was Adam alive when Enoch walked faithfully with God, which we're saying based on verse 22 is 60. Enoch is 65, and then from 65, 300 years until 365. But let's just think of 65. Yeah. Was Adam alive then?
I don't think so.
Auntie Michelle says no. He'd be the crypt keeper almost if that age. Okay, that's fair. Anybody else?
I'm thinking no. Now I said yes.
Adam died at some point before Enoch was translated, but I don't know where.
Okay, all right. So Pat is saying yes, he may have been crypt keeper age, but he may have had a couple breaths in him from birth, but not when he translated, right? So that's a good one as well. Right, yes. This is just raw, right? Obviously, I cheated and did the math already. So again, this is a trick question, but this is just Adam. Think about it. We don't think of Adam. We don't even think of Adam with Seth. Average person think Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel, and then we just Adam who. So what do we think?
I think he did.
He what?
He was alive.
He was alive?
He was born.
Okay, when he was born. Okay, so this side of the room, we're gonna
I think you looked at
he was just not translated. I'm gonna grab Beulah and Uncle and put them on this side. This side says Adam was alive when Enoch was born. But we think he just took a couple breaths and then he done passed on by the time Enoch translated. This side of the room, are you going to side with Auntie Michelle or leave her?
I think I said he died.
Okay, this side of the room, Dad, Dev, and Andy, you bunched together. You all believe he was gone already. Because yes, you follow your row. Each second row.
Well, I mean, because of the number, I'm not doing it. I mean,
Yep.
The numbers, it just
doesn't seem possible, right? Because it's a long time, right? Okay, Adam was 687 years old. Adam was 687 years old when Enoch started his walk with God, right? So
I think Enoch, when Enoch was 178, Adam died.
yes, she doing some math. So Adam was yes, this side of the room is right. Adam was alive when Enoch was born, but he had been dead 57 years after when Enoch translated, right? So he wasn't alive his entire life, but he was there during this process. Why is this a trick question, or to mention it is, before Eden, go ahead.
I'm sorry, your question was asking, was he alive when he was walking with God?
Mm-hmm.
He
was.
Which is a good, I think that's a good thing, because I want to go back to that question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When Enoch started his faithful walk with God, because I don't think we know when he started his faithful walk.
Okay.
Because if we go back to verse 21, it says, Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years. Mm-hmm. And I think the way that's written, it's not necessarily that the walk with God started then. Okay. I think it's just saying that he continued with God, but it's not going to say he died, because he's one who didn't die.
Good, okay.
So that's why I don't think we know that when he started his walk.
Good, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So the reason why I'm saying is because if you take this as those numbers, you know that Adam was he was 687 years old when this 65 age started and Methuselah was born. We know that Enoch only lived to 365, right? This is the only time. So some of these years of him walking with God, Adam had to be alive because Adam still lived from this moment as Enoch 65. He lived another 6 or 7, 8, 200 and something years, right? That's what I'm saying. It's a trick question, right? That's the point. There's no like, oh, wait, it's just this thing, right? Because the exact number we don't know, but it's a concept of trying to trick you to get your mind wrapped around this important concept.
I think what's also important is if we realize who was alive during that time. Enoch, because at the time of Enoch, he was already prevalent in the world.
Yeah.
And if we know that Adam was alive then, the first man, and everybody knows that he's the first man, and they could sit at his feet and listen to him. I mean, Enoch is what about 6. That Adam is his 6th grandfather.
Yep.
You know, 6 times grandfather. So if he could have sat there, why couldn't the rest of the people know what was going on?
Right.
So the question is, how did they know about God? Adam was right there. So I really think it's good to know the genealogy of who was around then.
Yeah, see, that's the point. We may not think of it this way, but this family, think of your matriarch and your patriarch still living multiple generations. What would that do for your family's lineage? Would it decrease or increase? Increase, right? If you can get your child to have a conversation with even your great-grandparent, let alone great-great-great, what would that do? That transfer of knowledge to be like, here is who you are based on our family tree, you would be, man, so far ahead, right? So this concept of Adam and these people in between Adam and Enoch still being around while the focal point of the study is happening is a big deal because from Adam's point of view, does Adam and God walk hand in hand the same way they did in the garden, right? At this point of Enoch being 65. No. So you are alive. You know what it's like to walk with God. Even whatever this verse means with Enoch, still is not the same. Is it? Is it the same as how Adam walked? No. So imagine how you would feel. Put yourself in Adam's shoes first. Then we come to Enoch. We're Adam. How would we feel if we heard and I have written down how many greats, but I'm not going to read all of these, but great, whatever number grandchild is walking with God in any form of fashion. Put yourself in Adam's shoes. Any form of fashion, would you feel some way? Be honest. Any form of fashion. Though we may not be able to get into what it means first. Just, you heard somebody say, for the time being, we're Adam, and someone just mentioned, hey, Enoch, your great, whatever grandson is walking with God. We would probably feel some way because we got kicked out and that relationship was severed.
But
so this is yes, and we don't think of him as like without his faculties. Adam is fine, right? His mind's sharp, so he knew full well he could remember. Again, it's not the same type of interaction because Adam was light fully at that point. We understand that, but just think conceptually. We would feel some way because it would immediately remind you, anyone been in a situation, whether it's love or had a possession or anything, and you lost that thing. And then someone mentions some version that they're experiencing, right? Almost immediately while they're talking in your mind, you're remembering, man, I remember when I had that good job, or I remember when I had this thing or that, right? You start remembering those experiences because someone is mentioning a similar experience. It happens in the positive, it happens in negative. Like when we see somebody get baptized, I hope while we're singing, we're also thinking, oh man, I remember when I got baptized. I hope it's not a negative, man, I remember when I got baptized. But I hope it's a positive. When somebody mentions some joy they have, we start thinking. I would assume older parents, someone say, my kid just rode a bike or spoke. I remember when my kid rode a bike for the first time or spoke, right? It's a remembering. So again, the concept we know from Bible students, from Genesis to Revelation, this is deep level. It's not the same walking because Adam was light in the garden. Sin clouded his light and it was with darkness. So when God said, where are you? Because light is gone. Now, this is more deep level, right? So therefore, Adam physically and Eve physically was still there, but something changed with their spiritual appearance, and physical didn't mean anything to God during the garden time because God is spirit, and they were talking friends, right? Because perfection. Now, we know post-sin, Moses wanted to speak face to face, and God said, what? You know, good request. You're a nice guy and everything, but impossible because light and darkness can't coexist, right? Again, deep level. Just keep your mind on surface, because when someone mentions something about experience they have, you don't know all the details they're talking about either, right? You're not going to say, well, my marriage is better than yours or my baptism was better than yours. You're just going to say, when someone mentions this thing, it reminded you. You ever smell something and you reminded of a time, a place, or a person, and then you're thinking, is it the same smell? No, but it's similar to your thought. So from Adam's point of view, from our guessing, we assume maybe, I know I would be like Nadine, I would feel some way, right? I wouldn't be a proud great-great-great-great-grandfather. I would be a hating great-great-grandfather to be like, man, he's stealing my shine. That's kind of like what I had, because to go from walking with God to being, even if I tried to sneak back in, they got the
And that's still there.
garden. Yes, that's another good point. Go ahead. I know you had your hand up. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we don't know what only what the Bible states.
Mhm.
So when you put the angel there to keep the people from getting back in the Garden of Eden, the logic is that at the time of the flood,
Yes.
that's when the garden no
Mhm.
longer exists.
Mhm.
The Bible is not very clear on what happens at the point with the garden. But
Very good.
if you think about all the people that are there, they know what's going on.
Mhm.
I mean, somebody knows where the garden is, and
Yep.
you don't go there because you're gonna get your hell off.
Yes, exactly. Even if you may have wanted to, right? I feel like in us in 930 years, one day we would have been like, well, let me just at least go see if the garden is still there or the angels there. Because we thought God was playing in the first place. That's how we bit the apple, right? Assume God, yes, that God was still, yes, maybe God was angry for 100 years, 500 years, my goodness. And then now he finally let the cherubim go, and he's waiting for us to go back. Even at least one of us in this room would give that idea, and you would persuade the rest of us, because I would say, yes, you're right, let's try to go back. Okay, Dad, and then anyone else.
I take a different approach.
Okay.
Simply because God drove him out. What Adam possessed with him was not only the storyteller, but the story experience. So him and his wife, when they had their grandson, they were able to see when men start turning back to God, calling on God's name, they got to see that their legacy wasn't lost with the murder. Parents, they were devastated, and their culture was turned upside down also. So there were so many things that Adam had to deal with simply because he screwed everything up. And I don't know if I can say that Adam and Eve went back or thought about going back, because when God moved you away from something, it's so devastating to you that you're going to know it. It's like having probably one of the worst beatings in your life. That's the one you remember. And what you did was so severe, you know that you can't return back, because your current physical state didn't allow you to go back to the spiritual realm. So the garden is just a place where you know where it is, Eve know where it is. The fact that the cherubim is there on guard made you think every day that you lived, you lost your place in your stats. So when you finally have your grandson, and in your grandson's lifetime, men start turning back to God, you know that validated something like you and your wife couldn't do that. Adam still paid the price living for the rebellion. But because of God and God's love for Adam and Eve, his spiritual heritage didn't. You know what I'm saying? Because God was still working, he was going to work that seed as a pathway for Jesus. So that's my outlook on it.
Okay.
I mean, all the time you live, it's like human beings today. For some reason, we just can't forget what we did wrong. We live with our guilt. Therapists tell us that all the time, that we live with our guilt. Although God has forgiven us for it, the worst thing that we did while we were living is the thing that we remember the most. You know what I'm saying? And that relationship was the worst thing that he did, because all the time he's living, he got to bear proof of God's existence, because he still sees God like that, because he experienced God that way. Okay. He's separated from him now, but nobody else on earth experienced that but Adam and Eve. They're the storytellers.
Okay, two things why your approach wouldn't be me. Two reasons why. First of all, when you break something, the first thing you do, if this was connected to this and this fell off, the first thing I do is what? Immediately I pick it up and do what? It's already broke. The relationship with God is already severed. I know I can't go back, but what do I do with the broken piece? Immediately I try to put it back. Even when I drop a glass, immediately Ellis start jigsawing it back. Even if I got all the pieces back together, do the plate come back whole? No, but immediately I try to put it back. So I feel even if God drove me out, I would still feel, Ellis, God is playing. This is why Ellis sin every day. Because I know full well, because I was just a little baby, I know Bible a lot. So when I sin, I do it on purpose. I never lie to God and say, oh, I didn't know. There's hardly anything in here that I don't know in terms of sin. So when I sin, I do it very, very willingly. Someone who's just baptized can say, well, I don't know. I just only been Christian 2 minutes. I didn't know this was sin. So my mindset immediately, at least some of those 930 years, knowing how I am only at 35, I would immediately try to make it better. When I do something wrong to someone, I try to make it better. That's just my personality. Like, I try to figure out some way. I remember, what's the things you like? I start thinking, what God liked? What made him laugh? How could we fix? And God said, no fixing. The other thing is, when it says in Genesis 3:24 about guarding, that word guard was for Ellis, because I'm telling you, first of all, I would move far away from the garden because it would be a memory. But after a while, I would think maybe God lifted the guard, so let me even try to find my way. Even if the garden was gone already, the type of personality that I am. This is why I said, put yourself in Adam's shoe, right? From your personality. Some people do something to others. The person say, don't ever talk to me again, and they never talk to them. I'm still going to call you, right? Because I'm going to think you was upset yesterday. You said don't call, so I didn't call today, but you're probably not upset the next day. I'm not going to not talk to you ever again, most likely from my personality, because I'm going to try to fix it, right? When you do something, or you ever hit something and you blow on it or rub on it, right? Oh, man. You ever see somebody accident rubbing their car? Oh, man, what do the rubbing do? But I don't know. It don't do nothing, but you feel kind of in your heart. I feel, man, I wish if I rubbed this, it'll fix.
It makes the scratch look better.
Yes, you do.
This is from experience.
Yes. It's a mental thing. You feel like, oh, man, if somebody said, hey, man, what you doing? You thinking, oh, man, they said, but it's already broken. Yeah, but then I start remembering what it used to look like, and then I'm like, oh, man. A couple Christmases ago, and Mom had this glass angel holder thing, and somehow, some way, she had two of them. I hit this thing and it broke clear off. Same scenario. First thing I do is take the head and I put it back on the base. Did that do anything? No. Then the next thing I do quick is I go on where? Google, and I search, found the exact thing. Before she could get fully mad, already found, already add the cart, already ordered, already be here in 2 days. Done. Came back, look, perfect. That's the type of personality I am. So for me, yes, at some point I think I would have came to this understanding and been happy. But the first time I heard about my great-great-grandson, if I would be honest with the group, I would feel some type of way, because I would feel like that was my thing. Just like if you in a relationship and you get out of a relationship and your best friend come up to you and say, hey, he or she got me flowers or some new Jordans. we feel, and Ellis will feel in his heart, man, I remember I used to get those nice things. I would be happy for you, but I would also feel some type of way because my personality is that way. Yes.
So Ellis, at first I agree with you about the feeling of that way, right? But this is how I think of it.
Yes, go ahead.
Get the woman's view.
Yes, I want to hear your view.
There's a part of you that does feel that way, but I think what you're missing.
Yes, I agree with you.
Because Kimmy and I was having this conversation when we spent a day together, and I was saying to her, parents always want better for their kids.
I agree.
And grandkids. So yes, I think there will be that niggling thing in you that says, that could have been me.
Mm-hmm.
That could have not only been me, but that could have been all of the rest of my generations living that kind of life with God, but I messed it up.
Mm-hmm.
That's the kind of way that
Yes,
I
I
was thinking of
agree.
that you kind of feel. But I think after a while you put that behind you because we don't see any evidence of God talking to man between there and Enoch. We don't have any biblical knowledge. So how did they find out about God? And I'm thinking that must have been Adam.
Right.
So Adam kept some relationship with God. He taught them enough that Enoch walked with God in such a way that God took him from this earth.
Right.
So I think there, as a parent, as a great grandparent, sometimes we were however many, there would have been some pride that he worked with that child or he had some influence in him. That's his progeny. And he has such a feeling with God, such a communication with God. So it's a very small part of me that would have felt terrible but the terrible I feel is not because he's doing it, but because I could have had that too.
Good, right? So we see what we're saying here, right? The point is, I told you that this is trick. Most of these questions are trick questions, right? Is to get to Dad and Sister Nadine's point are where you will be, and it's also perspective, because in a Bible study, someone has a different perspective than you. I think we miss that. You are so churched. Someone can read the same verse and you're thinking in your mind, oh, this got them. Go ahead, read this. You're going to be baptized as soon as you read this. And they read it and be like, okay, so, because it's a different perspective, right? Dad and Nadine are coming from a parental perspective. And as a parent, you know full well there's plenty of things that when your kid do that you did as a fail, that they succeed, you get immediate joy because you know they are going to be better off. But if you're not a parent, you may be approaching that differently. This is what I'm saying about when we talk about sin, salvation, right and wrong. These are concepts are baked into us. But some people, when you show them, they're like, all right, it says, be saved, be baptized, every one of you. And you're like, okay, so go ahead. And we're like, go ahead and do what, right? Or it'll say, hey, don't do this thing. And the person say, you're doing that thing, right? Person say, yeah. Your Bible said don't do it. You'll be like, okay, no lightning is striking me. That's the perspective I'm trying to push us to be is we can look at something. Don't beat yourself up in a Bible study that way. Zoom out and look at it from that. So even in tonight, we have to say what? Oh, from this perspective, some people could read this and feel some way. Just like some people in the Old Testament read and be like, oh, I would never serve a God like that. But when we read it, we're looking at it differently because we know the whole story. This is one of those situations. As a parent, I would pray you wouldn't be hating on your even son or grandson, right? Let's say you couldn't read and your child or grandchild was valedictorian of an Ivy League. I hope you're not sitting here thinking, man, this child got it so easy back in my day. I hope you feel some sort of pride that is still your lineage going on. That's the point I'm trying to make, right? From a very skewed or sheltered point of view, you would feel some way. But remember, that's how we got here. We got here off a skewed and sheltered point of views. Adam and Eve. They didn't look at it from God's standpoint, right? They looked at it from a false standpoint because it was not the full truth. That's what I'm saying. Most human, I would argue all from Ellis' point of view, all our human conflict from arguing to wars come from miscommunication. Because people refuse to see it from the other person's point of view. Most of the time when you're arguing, you're not listening. You're waiting for the person to stop talking so you can talk. But a mediator can see Neither one of y'all are communicating, right? This is the point from a Bible study standpoint, that sometimes you have to study multiple angles, because if you only go with your one angle, right? And I was just only talking, oh, I would be hating and this, and somebody in the study, Dad or Nadine, say, oh, I wouldn't be hating. Then I'll say, oh, I was only thing I prepared for is everyone who would be jealous. But 7 billion people, some people genuinely say, I would not be jealous. Then what I'm gonna say? Oh, I don't have a study for you. You always have to look at it that God has to fit everyone's personality, right? So as Pat said, study, and not only just this in the Bible, certain things we don't know every aspect of the whole story. We only know where the Bible is speaking. So when you're using your examples, always be able to touch at least a couple examples, right? It's like people who only talking about drinking, drunkenness. And someone say, but I don't even like alcohol. So what was the point? You spent 30 minutes on the person, I don't even like alcohol. So why are you keep telling me about drinking? You say, oh, I just studied for drinking. Person say, but I don't struggle with drinking or drunkenness at all. You don't got nothing else? Well, no, I just prepared. I assume that because you look like this or had you in per se, I don't struggle with that at all. This is the same concept as when you're talking about personalities, you have to look at it from that point. A couple of things I'm just going to read really quick. Mom had wrote in and said, when she hit her rim on the side of the road, it cracked. The crack reminds of what caused it to break. She rubs it. Obviously, it does nothing. So obviously, I get the rubbing from her, right? The crack reminds her of that thing, right? When she see the crack, it's, oh, man, I was stupid. I was silly. Whatever you feel, because like Nadine said, you blame yourself. So what do? The same thing I did. She, in a couple of days, got her rim fixed because the crack reminds her of her mistake, right? That's the same thing. As soon as I broke that, if I only left that one angel, every time I come downstairs, I would be like, wow, Mom really mad, but she don't want to sit. So I tried to fix it quick, right? That's just personality thing. Some people won't be that way. But the reminder, right, whether the garden was there or not, from Adam's standpoint, to me, the biggest thing I would miss is God. I would miss him. See what I'm saying? I agree with both Dad and Nadine. That mindset of the Ellis I'm talking about would pass, and I would no longer think about anyone else. I would think about me and God's relationship is not the same, right? So if I heard, this is moving in the study, that my great grandkid who only have some concept of God because of this, remember, it's not a folklore story. I'm still walking and talking so people can ask me what it was like. This person picked it up, and instead of going the king route, he went the positive route. I would see that as a success. Now, see what I'm saying? It's a different perspective because you're looking at it through other lenses. And this is where hopefully society from, I don't want to say society, this is where the church should move to generation. Society go the other way, because this is why history repeats itself, because we don't want to learn from the mistakes of the generation before. But from a Christian standpoint, hopefully we're learning from our previous generation and we're doing the baton and we're forward moving and not running in a circle, right? Not ending up 2 or 3 generations back where we were. We have to run a race going forward and not just in circular motion. Yes, Dad.
It's funny when Cain said to God, you know, my punishment is more than I can bear. Everywhere I go, these people are going to see this mark and they're going to know. And imagine what his father thought. Everybody going to ask him, who's your father? Who started all this? Because after a while, you as human beings, and I guess it all depends. I got more beatings than Nadine did. You know what I'm saying? Like, so God, the concept of God to me is, I kicked you out of the house. This is the reason why I kicked you out of the house. And on top of that, you've seen 3 levels of punishment. You physically, all 3 of y'all paid a physical price. The devil, Eve, and Adam. And not only that, I changed your location, and you're now the blame for all this. It is very different to move away and people don't know your past. But it's hard for you and your seed to create the future and everybody blame you for everything that goes wrong. And then your grandson turn and start doing the right thing Praise be to God that you finally, before you die, get to see some hope in your future. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, and you're right, it all depends on a person's personality. When they look at the story, God remained light, Adam died in darkness, and he paid a horrible price. But I realized after those beatings, there was something about this woman that she wasn't playing. The older I got, the smarter I got with being conniving. And I understood what made her tick. So there were times when I didn't get hit as often because I realized there's a portion of my mother's brain that I usually clicked on when I did something. And that's the way I see God. I see God like that today. There is a level of my sinful nature that the Holy Spirit clicks on and say, Ellis, you know that. I see God that was seeing me getting ready to enjoy the things that I'm conjuring up. So that's why I see him the way I do. That's why my story about him is my side of the room, so to speak, because I understand the guilt that Adam carried around with him because he paid a physical price. It's hard for you to see God not changing, but my Lord, you know now that every day you live, you die. And you're not on his side anymore. That was a pretty good place to be.
Right. Think of the apostles and everyone after. Difference between Peter sinning and even Saul. Right? Because Peter could be like, listen, man, you doing a lot of writing, but do you know what it's like to have feet being washed? Do Paul know that? Paul say, oh, I seen a vision. You know, no disrespect. God bless that vision. But do you know what it's like to see transfiguration and still deny 3 times? No. So therefore, you can't judge me. See, this is why in church, sometimes someone come forward and you feel something. Let me guess, you did. Why you didn't stop doing that? Hold on, wait a second. Wait a second. Because the person could say, well, what did you do 10 times last week? Oh, I swore. Person say, that's silly. I never swore. See? You struggle with whatever you struggle with. Some of us get certain aspects of Christianity right off the bat, like attendance. Some people be, as soon as they baptize, oh, I'm always there. Unless I'm providentially hindered, I'm there. Some people struggle their entire Christianity with attendance. Let's just use attendance. Those of us who don't struggle with attendance, what do we really feel? How come you can't come? That's all we really feel. Some we don't say that, but what's the big deal? Why you couldn't come? And when the person is talking, we're thinking it's an excuse. So when they finish talking, we say that was an excuse. And the person feels, man, why you gotta be so hard on me like that? I'm trying the best I can. And this is where a lot of church conflict comes from because of miscommunication. But people struggle with whatever they struggle with. Enoch was able to learn from Adam's mistakes. This is the progression of spirituality. This is what church should be about, but people don't listen. Enoch listened, but others don't listen. So when somebody come forward and say, hey, I struggle with this thing and this thing, y'all shouldn't do that. We got to listen and be like, oh, you're right. My faith walk will be blessed if I go a different path. I got to get off my path because this person ahead of me is saying that path leads to destruction. Put your feet on the righteous path. But too often, broad is the way to destruction. A lot of people hear that, but we don't adhere to it, right? Only a few people. But this is such a complex concept, and these comments are great because it falls into our everyday interaction with church. All of us can remember a time where someone even baptized a day more than us, gave some testimony, but usually it's years. And they said, you know, live this way, do this. Did we listen 100%? No. But we remember, I know I do, when you do something and this happens, I say, oh man, I remember, even if I can't remember it before, man, I remember it was a youth rally about this, or a camp, or a sermon. Something will remind me, I say, oh my goodness, not only am I in the situation, but I knew better. Someone told me, literally, don't do this exact same thing. And I did it anyway. In other times, we can remember where we were going to go down a path. and a brother or sister explained something or said a comment in class or a sermon was given, and we were like, oh, I'm going to do something else. And we visibly seen the success of that and was like, wow, God really is real. Both of those things happen in Christianity because you have peaks, you have valleys. That's your faith walk. But if you don't use the resources around you, right? Enoch is tapping into his resources. Abraham, Isaac, the whole list of people in Hebrews 11. There's so many resources. Sadly, in a congregation locally, in the church globally, too many of our brothers and sisters, we don't tap into our resources. You'll hear some of the men or women say, oh, don't miss your blessing, right? If you're not in tune with God, you don't know what that means. What that means is people saying, if you don't come, you'll miss an opportunity to be blessed. Now, the people who come will be blessed. So therefore, their life will be a couple notches blessed past you. So now there's a gap because we thinking, what's the big deal? This is why I say those who come. Remember, when you come all the time, you very rarely miss your blessing. So it's ingrained in you. But when you don't come, you missed a lot of blessing. So if someone says, hey, man, just come more. I'm saying just come more because I'm blessed filled. But I'm so far back here, I don't see what will change in my life if I come anymore because I don't come. See, I have to start coming some to get some of them blessings to understand what the rest of y'all are talking about. This is why I say all the time when people fall away, I tone in all the time with you have to come to a Sunday because I cannot pray you back better. When you're sick, you have to go to a doctor at some point. And the Bible is saying that is the way to connect. If it was some other way to get people back spiritually well, I'd be the first one proposing. But it's not. Just prayers of the righteous availeth much. And at some point, you have to walk and work your own salvation in fear and trembling. And that is the part that a lot of people miss, right? When you talk about parable of the sower, a lot of people will be saved. But then they fall away and we try to say, man, if you just keep coming, you won't fall away. But it's chicken before the egg, right? People saying, if I go to the gym, I'll look better. But I want to look better and not go to the gym. And we're like, what you want me to say, right? I want to have a better life, but I don't want to go to worship service every Sunday. We thinking us too. Like, what do you say? I don't know what to tell you. It's not possible. But people want to know some way. There is no way. You got to come to worship. You got to study your Bible. When you're already falling away or almost falling away, that faith walk seems corny to you. You thinking, well, I don't want to read my Bible. I'm barely praying now. But do we have any other way? What else can I tell you, right? All I can do is pray for you. But at some point, you're going to have to replug yourself back in and be active. That's really the only way. But people give up and they fall away. This is the sad part. Enoch bought into this concept, right? Adam missed it. I don't look bad at him because we all would have missed it because I know how people get. But did he give up? No, because even in this talking of Seth in the beginning of chapter 5, very interesting language when it talks about Seth was made in, what does it say? In who? Whose image? God or Adam? Adam, meaning to me, parents could speak to this. Oh, this is more like my kid. This is somebody like, because you have a couple kids that parents don't tell their kids that, be like, where'd this kid come from? This kid don't act like none of us. Then you have another kid like, I thought I was something wrong with my DNA. This kid is more kind of like me, right? This kid would be more of the way. And look what happened. Look what happened between the difference between Seth's lineage and Cain's lineage. See, Seth's lineage is what produced Enoch. Cain, Lord knows, right? Because this is someone who was listening, right? Inferred, as the comments were made, inferred that listening happened because look at the end result, right? We know from New Testament scripture that faith only comes from what? Hearing. So they had to hear from somewhere. Not like Enoch woke up one day and was 65, was like, man, I feel like a 12-year-old. I'm so young because I'm going to live a long time anyway. You know what? Let me try this God thing out. Hey, man, what's up, God? No, it don't work that way, right? Somebody had to have some concept given to him so that that young man could now progress in his walk. This is the faith walk. This is why you cannot walk on your own, which is why the first time people who fall away tell me that, I say impossible. Because let me tell you from my point of view, when I'm sinning, I have never prayed myself out of sin because I'm so sunken and drowning, I can't get free no more. I need someone who's on dry ground when I'm drowning to reach in and pull me up and say, hey, breathe. People in the world, or people who fall away, they feel like when they're in the world, they'll wake up one day like prodigal son. I don't take that gamble. Sometimes I come Sunday just to be reminded. Because if I don't come and I'm out there, after a while, you know what my heart will become? Hard like this. In the same scriptures and songs I used to like and things people say, remember you used to like this? I'll be like, nope, I don't like that no more. Think of human relationships. Male and female break, and it's done, right? Because men stupid, but when female have enough, only Jesus could convince her. If you did the same joke, you last week, man, let me do this same joke. You bought the same gift, you sang the same song. She don't care anymore. Don't care, bro. I'm already moved on. So what you doing? That's stupid now. I didn't realize how stupid you look or funny you look. I was just caught up in love. This is how people feel. This is why I say all the time is never feel bad if people don't respond to a Bible study or people don't want to come. Feel bad in terms of their soul, but don't put it a burden on you because people have their own mind to make up. This is the truth. And some people cannot see. Corinthians said what? For those that believe, the message is power. But to those that are lost or perishing, it's foolishness. They think it's silly. This is the concept between Cain's lineage, think about it, and Seth. Just for purposes of the class, that's why I made a big deal. There was an Enoch on this side, and there was an Enoch on this side. This other Enoch on Cain's side, no disrespect, but we don't care about him. We talking about this Enoch because he walked faithfully with God. And this is the story that we see long term. Yes, Auntie Michelle.
Well, I was going to say, when we're talking about lineage, and it just shows God's amazing. I'm just amazed by it every time when I read this. Because not only did he show his I don't even know the word I'm going to use, his marvel by just bringing Enoch without him dying. Then his son, he had a son Methuselah, which was, he allowed him to be the oldest person that lived. Methuselah had a son named Lamech, and then Lamech had Noah, who God chose to have him and his family, taken away. And then after that is when God wrote, he said, wait, this is it. Shorten man's days, he got tired of the foolishness. But it just goes to show how with Enoch, the blessings just kept coming after his generations and generations, Methuselah, then Lamech, and then Noah. And I think that's just amazing how he was so fond of him, or he loved him so much that the blessing just kept going.
That comment goes directly to Ellis's mindset. You say, hey, change based off Dad and Nadine's comment. Why? We visited Sister Bell on Sunday. She's 96. So I want you to imagine Sister Bell talking to Sister Shay. Right? Sister Bell talking to Sister Shay, right? You have Sister Bell, Sister Laura, Sister Shirley, Sister Shay. Okay, boom. Sister Bell is going to tell Sister Shay almost everything that come out of her mouth in terms of struggles, woes, all that. She's going to sympathize and empathize with her because she's been there, but she's going to say, sweetheart, that doesn't matter, because she's looking at it lineage. See, when you already been walked the path and you came back to this room and we're thinking, man, what's outside the door? We need to get this thing and that thing. And I'm sitting here thinking, actually, none of that matters because it's not raining outside. But it could be raining. You say, but it's not. I literally just came from outside. It's not raining. So let's just go right now. But we work ourselves up not thinking about lineage. A lot of Christian families make bad life decisions because they don't think about lineage, they think about short-term gain. In business, there's short-term gains and long-term gains, right? You got to be thinking the long run. When you're thinking Christianity, you got to think lineage, right? What's going to happen in the next generation, and the next generation, and the next generation, right? This is how you have a plant work. Because some people said, hey, I'm going to go help so that in the future, there is a Church of Christ in Bridgeport. We didn't have to come here. Ain't nowhere in scripture say you got to do plant work. We could have been like, I don't know what to tell them. We'll be in trouble. God bless people in Bridgeport. Hope they could come to one of these gospel meetings. But we went from tradition and structure to be uncomfortable for someone else's behalf, so that eventually, whether it's 100 years and Christ doesn't return, people can say the only reason I'm baptized is because back in 2009, some people came to the city that in the future I just happened to go. And if they never would have came, I never would have known anything about Jesus Christ, which is our own history with those brothers that came from Ohio. That's how God works. He's thinking such long term, but we are too short-sighted. We all fall into that category. But when we don't think about things from a long-term standpoint, sometimes it hurts us from that. Okay, a couple of things quickly. First is Noah question. Was Noah alive when Abraham was born? Yes, he was 892, but was not alive when Abraham, when God spoke to Abraham, because Abraham was 75 years at that time. And Noah had been dead 17 years. But again, it's interesting because we don't think of it that way. Post-flood, Noah still was around, right? So this is, again, the same concept from Adam to Noah that we talked about was Noah to Abraham is this concept when they populate the world again, we can't go back to how it was before. So I have to tell every generation to do better and be better. And at that time, they lived close. Remember, God told Abraham to leave, but he had already had 75 years of his family's teaching. It wasn't like he went off on his own. So this is why Christian families usually operate different than worldly families. Like Christian parents will say, you know, my kid need to be around me. Why? A worldly parent will be like, you know, why? You know, I was on my own. But as a Christian, you're thinking, you could be on your own and exist in society, but I don't want my child on their own and leave church. So you're thinking it from a different perspective. So 75 years, Abram was around, and then God chose and moved away. But it's the same correlation, Adam and Noah. The knowledge flowed from those men to their lineage so that you can have what we have today. The other thing is, how many people mentioned in the Bible are said to escape physical death? Enoch is one. What's the other person? There's two. Elijah. Okay, so we skip going through the semantics of that for sake of time. Why was Enoch privileged to escape death? This is not a trick question, but a loaded question, right? So we know that he escaped the physical death, which is a privilege. Well, we haven't died, but we know people passed away. You died. It's a privilege to just go only two in the history that we know of mankind. So this is a privilege. Why was he able to? It's not a trick question. It's a loaded question, but think about it from the concept of our entire study, right? Why was he allowed to escape to have the privilege of escape physical death? Anyone can open up to it. Okay, faith, right? Faithfulness. He walked faithfully with God. Inference here. Bought into the concept that his family taught him, understood the difference between God and man, knew God as the creator and the source of life, right? This concept that we would have as a parallel. Someone asked us, you know, how could we escape the privilege of spiritual death, right? Walk in the light as he is in the light. Only way to the Father is through Jesus Christ. Have a relationship with Jesus, be saved, right? These same spiritual concepts that we know is a privilege to escape. Spiritual death is something that we can talk about in terms of escaping physical death. Anyone else for question 6 before we go on?
Baby got seasick.
Yes. Yeah, baby got seasick. I like it. Good. Okay, 7. Does the Bible say what the purpose was for Enoch to escape death? This is a loaded question. Does he say what the purpose is? And here's why I'm saying it's loaded. If somebody said, what is the plan of salvation? We'll tell them, we'll tell them how to get there and all that. And what's the purpose is to escape spiritual death. Person say, oh, okay, that's the purpose. But these two, Elijah and Enoch, but we're talking about Enoch tonight. Does the purpose matter? Meaning, like, why God did it from God's point of view, does that matter in terms of us here? Because the reason why I'm asking that is a lot of times people want to know kind of the why. And sometimes when we talk, our why stops and we just get to the point where we say, well, we don't have no other verse. It just says to do it. Like, people going to want to know, well, why does God not want instrumental music? Well, I can tell you, but why does he not like it? Well, sweetheart, I don't know. That I can't tell you. He just say he don't. But why? Well, I don't know the why, but because I don't know the why, does that impact me not doing it? That's why it's a loaded question. Because people will start looking for loopholes. To give you a modern example, right? Enoch, you may not have heard in this context, but the thief on the cross. There's people not baptized today because they say, oh, the thief on the cross, Jesus said be with paradise, so then why would I be baptized? Literally, it's people that believe the whole study and be like, gets it. So we know, does that matter? We know the concept of Jesus before he raised from the dead, this concept of Hadean realm, that's high level. But even if you knew nothing about those scriptures, where Jesus went, what paradise meant, all that thing, it comes down to, can Jesus do whatever he wants to do in terms of his plan of salvation? Well, yeah. And does that impact us if he says you do this? No, because he's perfect. Get my point? Sometimes people want to rope us in a study down a path and say, see, I got you. You didn't even know. Look, Enoch didn't even die. So how come he didn't die? What's the purpose of that? That have nothing to do with you dying. I guess that's my point, right? We gonna die unless Jesus come back. And no more Enochs. So no one can leave a study saying, man, I got them. Because look, you didn't even know Enoch and Elijah translated. So maybe God will pick me as a third. Nope, sweetheart. Nope. Don't got a chance. But some people believe that because they come to the Bible study with a couple handful of scriptures that their grandmother taught them. And they hang their entire Christ belief on those couple of scriptures. And that's where the difficult in terms of perception comes in, because their mind is already made up. And you know they are understanding an error, but they don't want to take the time for the what, when, how, and the why. They just trying to trip you up. This is why I'm saying it's a loaded question. So any comments on this?
Real quick.
Yes.
The wording that's used here, it says that for Enoch, it was that he pleased God. My mind goes back to Jesus Christ when he was being baptized by John the Baptist, and God spoke from heaven and said, this is my beloved son, and pleased, because of him fulfilling what God required of him to do for all right, to fulfill all righteousness. So pleasing God is not just a mental condition, it is an outward condition of following what God desires for you, reason for being created to begin with. So it's just a side note of the wording there that just happened to come to my mind thinking about that.
And that ties in with 7 and 8 together, right? Because this concept, this wording, why that's a big deal, it matters when we get to Hebrews 11:5, right? Even if it was just to use him as an example, that's all God would need as purpose. Because Hebrews 11, he's used as an example, so much so that the very next verse after mentioning Enoch is one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. So even if it was just to use his life as an example for us in the future, is that not a benefit? Yes, that's God weaving things together long term, not short term. So wording does matter because it brings our minds to other biblical truths and concepts that we can weave these things together. So 7 and 8, anyone can respond here because Pat's comment brings us both to those. 8 was, what should we take away from the life and story of Enoch in our own walk with Christ today? 7 was, does the Bible say what the purpose was for Enoch to escape death? So 7 and 8. Any comments on anything so far? Yes.
It's correct. There's a benefit for paying attention and doing what God asks you to do. There is a spiritual benefit for that. And from Enoch's point of view, I mean, he's not sticking his chest out there, but I mean, the man worked hard in the society that he lived in, and there was a benefit for that. And he received that benefit. And throughout humanity's history, when we look at biblical doctrinal proof of how God related to man, we see those type of men like that get benefits for that. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing. Like I told this one religious group at Seaside Park that cornered me one time, they said there's no such thing as hell. I said, well, there's no such thing as hell. Because if I'm not going to be punished for doing wrong, why would I be awarded for doing wrong? I mean, there's a good and evil. So if you don't believe there's a good, an evil, then there's no good. Mm-hmm. And I just went on and on with those kinds of concepts. I mean, and God is who he is.
And that, just before we get to Dev, that when you answer that way, I personally like, because it's thought provoking. Because they came to the argument trying to argue hell don't exist, but they would never say heaven doesn't. So now it pushes them on their heels to be like, well, then explain to me how heaven exists, right? So you have to look in your debates or arguments biblically, you have to look for little wins that you can get people to think more. Yes, Brother Deb.
I was a little fine. Yes, I can say those people who really influenced by Bible and who is full-time people, they are like, they think all the time, kingdom of God, and preaching word of God, and walking all the time God's business. They might. But we are busy with our life.
Yes.
So much daily, every day, feel and all things. But I got this, all the math that you said earlier. I did that. And Adam saw Lamech. When Lamech was 874, when he burned, I mean, yes, the Adam was 930 years old. I think he might be able to see him or not, but then he was there. But he not able to see Noah, because when Noah was born, the Adam was, I mean, he already dead.
Yeah, Adam was already dead past Enoch, yeah, because 930 is gone, yeah.
So my point is here, the limit when the Hannah was born, by the time there was 622, maybe he was there. But he don't care,
Right.
When you move to different area, different location, no one cares. You live somewhere and your generation go next. Like me, my father, where he born, I don't live there. I'm in America, right? So he can tell my family, my generation how far I go. So therefore, he was there, but although he not able to see this man, this older man. So I have now all the ages. I figured out everything. Anybody wants to?
Yeah, and here's that point. Reason why I said it was tricked, because remember when Enoch is 65 and has Methuselah. Methuselah is how old when he have Lamech? 187 years, right? So you add that, remember each verse that it's mentioning, it's only mentioning in the context to which the next generation is started, right? So yes, even 187 years from that, Enoch is still alive, you're still doing math. But total wise, when dead, this is going back in the verse, right? Because the verse is doing both. It's telling you how old they were and how old when they died. But it doesn't mean that when they died, the next verse starts. You know what I'm saying? That's why it's a trick, because he was 65, Enoch was when Methuselah, but Methuselah was 187 when he had Lamech. So obviously just add that math. So Enoch was still alive when Lamech was, and then you can do your math. But again, it's a trick, right? Concept wise, it's a trick question to say conceptually. I know I didn't always think of it that way. So I assume a lot of people wouldn't in the world. If you're not a Bible student, you wouldn't think of Adam and Noah still being around during Adam to Enoch or Noah to Abram, right? Because you're just thinking from a human concept of years. So I think of it from lineage. I know that family spiritually, I understand physically and all these things, sin and all that stuff. I think of Joseph on his deathbed and even Jacob on his deathbed. Families would benefit spiritually from lineage still living, but you have to work out your own salvation in fear and trembling. There's a lot of children, right? You could be child, you could be 50 years old, but still someone's child. You would benefit from your mother or father spiritually. Well, physically, of course, we can argue, but spiritually with them still living. Yes, we know. But God's plan is that at some point you have to work your own salvation out in fear and trembling. You may move away. The man will leave his mother and father, and he have to start his own family. This is how God set it up. Again, we can start saying, hey, that's not fair. Wouldn't it be better if this is how you get changes in church? Because people start saying, well, wouldn't it be better if we don't really do it that way because I'm more of a clingy person? See what I'm saying? Let's dial back. Is these things are giving for our, what does the Bible say? Learning. So we have what we need, and at each given time, God is choosing when their time is over. Yes, there's a wealth of things that your loved ones could benefit from with you still being here. But God is able to get those same benefits to them and through other brothers and sisters. And we don't like to always think of it that way. And it's not wrong. Obviously, when you lose a loved one, it's painful. But you don't stay in the pain state, because remember, God will bless you the way he blesses you. And this is proof of that. Deb, and then we're going to be.
This is the very good the evidence that we can start conversation with the other religious people that I have been discussed so many times with people. I mean, they are Hindu or Buddha or whatever it is, and they don't. Anybody can say they're more than 3 or 4 generations have any reference. In our country now, the Buddhism searching their generation, they couldn't find any evidence. But Jesus has that all the his lineage. Meaning we have this evidence that everything. So that's why we can say how long humankind lived. No longer than 6,000 years. That's what we can tell, right? But at the last, I can tell any people that why we are reading the Bible, because the Bible is the only source that we can recognize there's God. Otherwise, no one say there's God. And I sent you the link that Gavin said, is there God? It was good. Did you like all?
Yeah, it was very good.
Yeah, therefore there is the truth. This is the truth. All things. And Jesus is from here.
Yeah. Right? Think of Matthew. Matthew makes a big deal of lineage, right? John just starts. In the beginning was the word, but Matthew takes in this, to get this. So it lets you know that it validates who Jesus is. Not just Jesus popped up in a manger, where he come from, right? It brings you back.
Luke.
Luke, yes.
Luke.
So that's what
just brings up to the Abraham.
Yeah.
But the Luke bringing all the way back.
Right. Good. Sister Beulah?
In my experience, I would say that the great grandparents give better foundation for the grandchildren and the great grandchildren. Because in my personal experience, my great grandmother, she started teaching us the word of God. And I remember this as a child, 11, 12 years old. She was studying the book of Acts. And she taught us about Acts 10, Cornelius and Peter and Jude and so on. Then she went back to Daniel, the book of Daniel. And I remember that as a child. Afterwards, my father, he built a foundation with his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, the cousins and them. Up to yesterday, I was speaking to my niece, and she was saying to me that she asked me how long I become a Christian. And she said, wow, I could remember Grandpa used to come and have Bible study with us, And it is a good thing that as grandparents and great-grandparents, to start teaching the grandchildren or your great niece and nephews and everything about the word of God. You will never forget it.
Yep.
Because my cousins in Seattle, many times they refer to my father. If it wasn't for him, we would not be in a Christian.
Good.
So that is a foundation that you build.
Generation and generation.
Right.
Very good. Anyone else before we quickly go? You had your hand up.
Huh?
You had your hand up?
Oh, no, I want to say, I think that that these facts are very important to us, and the fact that it just shows God in all his glory and all his wonder, and all his amazement, and just lets us see that the God that we serve is an awesome God.
Mhm.
I mean, there's no limitations to what he can and has and will do.
Good. All right, the last question is just that wrap up for us. Have you ever wanted to walk with God's closest characters in the Bible? How can people walk even closer to God than the biblical characters mentioned in Hebrews 11? That's 11 verse 40. So 11 verse 40, God has provided something better for us than should not be made perfect apart from us, right? And that's the benefit through Jesus Christ. All the blessings that Enoch, Elijah, Adam, and Noah, Moses, David, Samuel, all these biblical characters, we have the Holy Spirit living inside of us, right? And this is why it's an even bigger deal for us. We may not feel that way, but this is why we are a royal priesthood. So that's how it's supposed to be translated to us, to take this whole Hebrews 11, which mentions Enoch, that is talking about they only knew in part, right? They didn't know fully. We know the full story, so our walk has to be rooted better because we're walking in the light as he is in the light. They don't know about he is in the light in this second, right? They only have a concept of God. They don't know the true, perfect form of salvation, redemption for mankind, but we have this. So this is a dispensation or a time period. This is where you want to be because God's not deciding. Okay, good. Well, over time, but thank you for everyone's comments and participation. We'll close and a prayer mentioning our